Alrighty, let's just go through this entire thing. I'm at work. If I get interrupted, I'm just going to keep going because it apparently is impossible to go without getting interrupted here. So, all the vessels is what we're going to start with, which actually is just going to be the heart sounds. So, starting off with heart sounds, S2's at the top, S1's at the bottom. And that's because you're actually listening to the valves closing. And you can see the aortic valves up here on the top. Same with the pulmonary. Yeah. So you can hear this on the second intercostal space on the right side, and you hear the aortic valve there. You hear the pulmonary valve on the second intercostal on the left. You then move down to the fifth intercostal space on the right, and you can hear the tricuspid valve. And if you go to the left, then you hear the bicuspid. So it's just bicuspid goes straight down, tricuspid goes straight down, and then aortic is up here, and pulmonary is up here. Following blood circulation, you've got the aortic arch here with its three parts, which is the brachiocephalic, the left common carotid, and the left subclavian. You can see then, and pretty obviously, that these are both carotids, and so then this is obviously the right common carotid, and right when this branches, this no longer is the brachiocephalic, it's just the subclavian, carotid, carotid, subclavian. So it becomes the same thing once they've branched. Then this is just the common carotid still, and you can see right next to it is the internal jugular. You then have the external jugular, which is pretty obvious. It's just way unpaired, way out here on the outside. And that's pretty easy to identify. For the carotid artery, though, what makes it internal versus external is you see this hole. So when the common carotid goes into the actual skull, that's the internal. The external, you can see it branches up here and goes on the outside of your skull, so that's the external. So external, in this case, just means goes outside of your skull and doesn't go inside of your cranium, which this one does. For the jugular, it's super obvious because it goes way on the outside here. Moving on to the arms, we'll go down here. You can see we've got the subclavian up here, and right when you get to the collarbone, pretty much, it branches into the axillary, and it's just this section right below the axillary. You can see it's kind of an arbitrary spot that it is decided. For the vein, it's right before this branch, and right when it branches, it becomes the axillary for this section. And then it kind of ends right when the armpit ends. So it's supposed to be the area under your armpit is the axillary. This branch up that's unpaired, it's all on its own, is going to be the cephalic vein, and there is no cephalic artery. Moving on, you can see we've got this big artery here, which is the axillary, and it branches into the brachial, or it becomes the brachial, and then this one right next to it is the brachial vein. But then you see there's this far branch down below. It's kind of like, you can think of it as a basement, so that's the basilic. So way down here is the basilic vein, way up here is the cephalic vein. And then we'll move on to the elbow region. So this section right here where you draw blood is the median antecubital, and that's where you usually draw blood. You then still got your brachial vein, your brachial artery, and this is still the basilic. It goes all the way down, just the whole way down. It's again unpaired. You move in here, and then when you get down here, it's just normal. So you've got your ulnar artery once it branches down below. And then there's an ulnar vein right next to it. And then you've got your radial artery and your radial vein. So that's pretty much it for the arms. Then we'll move on to the other unpaired vein, which is the zygos. So that one's kind of hard to see. It's right by the spine. We're actually going to remove the arteries for a second so it's easier to see. And you see this section of artery, or this vein, right on the spine. So that's the azygos. You can see it's down here. Goes along the spine the whole way down. And then it's unpaired. There's no azygos artery. But you can see this where it branches to the side. It's got the hemiazygos vein on the other side of the spine. So running down on both sides, kind of right below the heart is where it branches. And that's that. Put the arteries back on. Let's go to the stomach, which I think is the most interesting or most difficult part. So you can see there's this branch right here where it's pretty much everything that matters in the abdomen is coming off of this celiac trunk. So off the celiac trunk, we've got this one going up. So that's the gastric for your stomach. Going to the side here is the splenic. So you see this is the gastric artery. This is the splenic artery. This big thing down below is the superior mesenteric, which is kind of obvious. Right here we've got the hepatic, because it's going, to your kidney. And then if we scroll down a little more, it's really hard to move on this because it's meant for touchscreen, which I don't have. So remember, this is the superior mesenteric. Down here is the inferior mesenteric, which is actually just coming off the side of the abdominal aorta. And then if you go in between the two, so this is the superior mesenteric, this is the inferior, kind of in between the two, there's this medium-sized one going straight down. So that's actually the gonadal artery. This, in my software here, it calls it the testicular. Same thing. It's on our study guide, so it's hard to see the left or the right-sided one, but they're both there in that kind of region in between the two. On the flat guy, it's easier to see, so that's just general. Besides that, let's keep going down. So down here, we've got another unpaired vein. It's just the saphenous, the great saphenous vein, which they use for bypass surgery. There's no saphenous artery, it's just this. And then the veins and stuff inside here by the iliac bone is the iliac artery and the iliac vein. The external ones are the ones that actually, you can see they go above the iliac here. So like this one, it's literally going on the outside. The ones that are internal are the ones that go on the inside. So you can see, click on this big thing. This is the internal iliac artery. It's going back this way inside. And then the external goes actually over the iliac. Same with the vein. So this would be the external iliac vein, and the external iliac, or internal iliac vein is right here, just going on the inside, kind of towards the tailbone. Then moving down, that's pretty much it. I mean, everything else you already, I'm assuming, knew. You've got your femoral artery and your femoral vein touching each other right here. See this one way on the outside, it's kind of unpaired. So circumference artery. We don't need to know that, I guess, though. That's that. Let's move on to drawing blood. That one's mostly the antecubital in your elbow. Where can you feel pulse? That's right here. So we've got 3 spots, or not 3 spots, quite a few spots. Got the carotid, then you've got the brachial, then your radial and ulnar, then femoral, popliteal, and then your posterior tibial and dorsalis pedis. So that's where you can feel all the pulses. Obviously the main one is radial, brachial, and carotid. Other than that, let's keep going through this. Vein from an artery. So this is on a slide. So veins are much thinner for their tunica media. It is much less smooth muscle. They also are under much less pressure, so they are usually not fully round. They're usually kind of like semicircles or even flat. And then know the composition of each layer. So the interna is simple squamous. The media, the most important part, is the smooth muscle, because that contracts and expands stuff. And then the externa is connective tissue or collagen. It's made of collagen. So collagen fibers or connective tissue, it's the same category. Identify a lymphatic vessel and its valve. This one's really easy because he just said the only one that's red is a lymphatic vessel, and the valve is just the line in the middle of the vessel is the valve. Blood pressure, it already says it on here, but it's the sphygmomanometer. And that's the cuff, and then the stethoscope. And then systolic pressure is just a super basic estimation. Is if you can't take a radial pulse, then that means their systolic is under 80, because it's not enough pressure to get to your radial artery there. Carot cuff sounds. are the two blood pressure readings that you get to get your systolic and diastolic. What it actually is at the very top. That's the pressure that, so when you pump up your cuff, it completely closes all the arteries and veins, cuts off blood flow. As you lessen the pressure, there's going to be a point where when your heart beats, for a second, that beat is able to expand the arteries. So that's what you hear, is the arteries expanding and then collapsing again a second later once the blood gets past them. Then as you lower the pressure more and more, there's going to be a point when you stop hearing those arteries expanding and contracting, because now they're just always inflated, because now you've hit the diastolic pressure number. So it's the arteries expanding and then deflating from each heartbeat. And it's, it happens at the systolic first, and then the low pressure is the diastolic. Here, heart sound, so that's intercostal 2 on the right and left, and then intercostal 5 on the right and left. EKG lead. So this one's kind of interesting. It's kind of like a clock, is what one of the people that I was studying with said, and it makes sense that way. So at first, it's straight across. Let's see if I can draw on one of these pen. So at first, it's just straight across. Then it's going to be like thinking like a clock. So then it's going to be, this one goes down. So then it's right arm to left leg. And then you just keep thinking like a clock. So then this one moves over. And then it's going, so at first it's right arm to left arm. Then it's right arm to left leg. And then it's left arm to left leg. And that's all of those different lead 1, lead 2, lead 3. And the inverted graph reading on the EKG is normally you're reading the voltage from the negative to the positive lead. And on the inverted one, you're just reading it like the lead is actually traveling electricity this way. And on the inverted one, they're literally reading backwards. So it just is reading it inverts it. So now it's reading negative to positive, and it just goes the other direction.